Just heard that we are about to start. How are you, Ralph? Do you hear us? Well?
Yes.
Very, very good. So we got the recording going, Sam, right? Okay. So welcome, everybody. Welcome to, I think it's number 8 of the Media Club. We are back today on Monday to talk about an article, actually a documentary about algorithms. And we have Devina, who will actually facilitate the conversation today. She is from India, and I think I'm not going to talk too much. I will turn it right away over to Devina to explain the documentary a little bit in the outline, and so it's all yours, Devina.
Thank you, Michael. Hello, everyone. Can everyone hear me? All clear? Great. So yeah, I'm Devina, your host for today with Samantha and Michael. And this is the May meeting, and we are discussing The Secret Rules of Modern Living Algorithms, a documentary by mathematics professor Marcus Du Sautoy. He reveals the hidden world of algorithms and how these 2,000-year-old problem solvers work in this hour-long video by BBC. And in the agenda that Samantha forwarded, I came across Charlton Gillespie's work on algorithms in the edited volume on digital keywords. You know, if you'd like, I'll also put a link in the chat box for everyone. And I'm also putting a few other things in the chat box for everyone. Yes, the agenda and the link. Yes, so one question that comes to my mind is, which are some of the interesting resources and algorithms that you have come across? You could post the names, the links in the chat box throughout the hour. We'll circulate a list later. And yeah, it would also be great if you're active on Twitter, you could share your handles. I'm just posting mine on the chat box. We can connect. And we're also live tweeting this as much as possible without sending out the Zoom meeting link, because we had some unpleasant experience as Samantha was sharing last time we did that. So we're just using hashtags like hashtag Digiyuri, hashtag Media Club, hashtag algorithms. Yeah, so all these details are in the group chat. And the next 45 minutes or so will be spent discussing the background and summary of the documentary, quick thoughts from the participants, and breakout discussion groups and topics given in the agenda below, followed by your reviews and wrap up. Hope this sounds good. Yes? Yes.
Sounds perfect.
Ourselves, I'll go first. I'm Devina. Like I said, I'm your host for today. And I'm a second-year PhD student with the Department of Communication, University of Hyderabad, India. Who'd like to go next? Michael?
Well, I go next. So I'm Michael. I'm the user services librarian at the American University of Paris. I have like a sociological background, but since 10 years, I'm teaching information literacy. So that's me. Who goes next? So here we go, Mary.
Yeah, hi, I'm Mary. I'm an English professor in New Hampshire, and I'm interested in all things digital.
And maybe, Rabbit, we don't hear you. Oh, we don't hear you.
Okay.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Cheryl Rabbit. I'm a chief academic officer in a pre-K-12 system in Rhode Island. And I'm very interested in the implication for technology and digital practices in pre-K-12 schooling.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes, my name is Ralph Beliveau. I teach at the University of Oklahoma. I teach media studies.
And maybe Carla, if you have, just want to say where you are.
Hi, how are you?
Hello, how are you?
Fine. I'm from Brazil, and I work at the Federal University here, and I work with digital literacy and reading online, and I'm very concerned about how we work with this at the elementary school. So I try to connect work at the university with the work at schools, regular school, and that's it.
And then we got Yonti, Sam, Aka Sam.
Hello, I'm Yanti/Samantha, and I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Hong Kong, and I'm also teaching news literacy to undergraduates here in Hong Kong, and I'm interested in all of the literacies, so that is why I'm part of this group.
There you go. Back to you, Devina. We don't hear you. Devina?
Sorry, I forgot to unmute. So, we'll just quickly go through the summary of the documentary, maybe in 3 or 4 lines. So basically what Professor is trying to tell us is algorithms are omnipresent, they're invisible, and the documentary delineates what they are, their origin, how they're useful, implications for the future. And what algorithms basically are, as defined in the documentary, is a list of step-by-step instructions for problem solving. And then they go into the foundations and history, how it predates computers, the Euclidean algorithm to measure the greatest common divisor. I really like that graphic, by the way. And how algorithms are general solutions to problems so we avoid reinventing the wheel. Then we go through some practical applications. We look at Google and the PageRank algorithm, which is a type of algorithm. So you've got ranking, sorting, matching, etc. types of algorithms. And some examples of practical application like dating apps and organ donation. And some features of a good algorithm, how they need to be accurate, quick, efficient, limits and limitations of algorithm, and how heuristics come into play. And blurring the boundaries. This was a very interesting section for me. From mathematicians making algorithms for mathematicians, moving on to making them for computers, to now using machine learning where algorithms write themselves, and how self-adapting algorithms using machine learning are already replacing humans in tasks where automation and scale are found. Now, I was wondering if, before we go into breakout group discussions, if participants could share quick thoughts about what they thought of the documentary, one phrase or one word about the documentary, if we could have a quick round from all the participants.
I don't want to, maybe, I don't know how to frame the discussion, but I thought it was very positive. It was a very positive documentary about algorithms. And but I really enjoyed watching it, so that was my first take on it.
I was thinking that he turned something complex into something very simple, very clear, very clearly explained.
Who else?
It's interesting because we always think of algorithms as something bad. Something is going to control your life, it's going to control everybody. And he shows that there are nice use of that. It's not so bad. There's other uses. We can use it for very good stuff and not just for controlling people.
Yeah, so I agree. I was actually quite surprised at some of the applications that I never really thought about, because I tend to apply a very critical lens to all things media, and by critical I mean like critical theory. So I was quite surprised to learn some really pleasant things about algorithms, but also had that critical like, yes, but like we're kind of skipping a couple things here. So I'm curious to hear what you guys thought about that too.
And then there's also like a couple of Rabbit, Miss Rabbit.
Okay.
You need to.
Yes, I'm here. First of all, I agree. I think it was very, very approachable, which was surprising and entertaining, actually. Very engaging, and that made it, again, the big word for me was approachable. To really think about its implications in, common or average or work, right? Everyday work. So some of the questions I posted in the chat there that I have related to the things that I'm wondering about, and I don't know if this is a place to say it, but I am concerned, or I have questions about the unintended or intended biases in the development of algorithms and that sort of idea, which is very, very new and foreign to me. So I don't claim to know much other than it's curious. But on the flip side, and the more positive side, is some of the powerful implications for pre-K-12 use of data. We struggle with the effective use of data often, and being able to actually use it to help move teaching and learning. So I think that is something also I would love to consider more, and particularly around this idea of if-then algorithms. We talk about that a lot in practice, teacher practice. If we want students to do X, then we should be doing these kinds of things. I know it's very loose and it's not mathematical in this explanation, but I wonder how to connect that work in some of the more sophisticated algorithms that he talked about.
Ralph, you were maybe about to say something, or did we cut you off?
Oh yeah, no, that's okay. I think it's interesting. It would have been. I think it would be interesting to see a version of this that was a little less positive, maybe, to talk about some of the implications of how algorithms have been used. I posted in the chat the definition of man, which is, of course, the antiquated patriarchal version. But the thing that, and this is the definition that Kenneth Burt came up with, and it was something that struck me a very long time ago, because he includes the phrase rotten with perfection. And the idea, and I thought it was interesting in the documentary when algorithms let go of the striving for perfection and instead just basically decided to do what work it had to do sort of the best way possible to it, which partly reminded me of Kenneth Burke's definition, because he thinks that human symbol using tends to be rotten with perfection. This idea that we can, somehow come up with a completely predictable denotative way of using symbols and language and things like that, where there wouldn't be any conflict about what things mean. Anyway, I just thought that was a really kind of interesting aspect of it, because it also reminds me of something I read a long time ago about border culture in the southern United States, where you have Mexican culture and American culture coming together, and how one of the shifts that this anthropologist was seeing was that it shifted from sort of trying to perfect everything to just trying to make things work. And it just drives what you're doing differently if the outcome is that rather than perfection. So I thought that was an interesting part of the documentary.
Yes, I don't know what to say actually right now, but I think the reactions, they were very good. Do we want to continue right here, like with some of the thoughts, or do we want to go to the breakout rooms? What do you think, Sam, Devina?
I really think that breakout groups might help right now, because we have quite a lot of opinions going on, and a smaller group will have better discussions, I believe.
Okay, so we're going to have 2 groups of 3 and one of 4 actually.
Okay.
And Devina, is there like a special question you want us to look at in the breakout rooms, or is that something like a general?
Right. So I did have, for the first breakout, I had 2 questions actually, if time permits. What did you think about the framing of the subject? I think to a certain extent we've spoken about this in the main group already, but if you'd like to, if you still have some thoughts you'd like to share. And the other question is, does the topic of algorithms come up in your class teaching or research activities? I'll just put these topics in the chat for everybody. Already in the agenda, but nonetheless.
Great. And Devina, how long do you want us to be in the rooms?
How about 10 minutes?
Okay. I'll split us up now. Cool. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you. Join.
Welcome
back.
Hello, everybody back. Hello.
Hello. How was the breakout session? How did it go? Yes. Would someone like to quickly share what happened in their breakout?
Who goes first?
I'll go first. No problem. Okay, so it was Michael and me in our breakout, and we spoke about the documentary being very positive, and then how it was actually, in a way, it was great because it sort of explained in a very approachable way what algorithms are, and it gave us relevant examples. It was very easy to understand a rather complex or technical term. But it would have been great if we would have the other side of the story as well, which is something that we saw in the chat in terms of inquiry from people as well. So yeah, that and about research and teaching. So we don't directly deal with algorithms, but for instance, me, I'm going to start my pilot soon for my PhD thesis. So it's on young people in social media. And what is social media without algorithms? So yes. Okay, over to someone else.
It's just people without algorithms.
So who goes next? Anybody who wants to go next?
I vote for Sam.
Well, we didn't actually get as far as like how we're running into algorithms in classes very specifically, but we did talk a little bit about, I talked a little bit about how I use them to talk about the notion of kind of cultural programming, sort of how the culture is integrated now with algorithms. In one of the classes I teach, we talk about ethical issues and issues in media, and sort of like the whole equation of, if you don't understand what the algorithms are doing, you'll still be able to function, but you're kind of subject to whatever their biases, for lack of a better term, are.
Yeah, and that, sorry, I'm keeping an eye on my email, so sorry if I ever like say something that doesn't make sense or that you just said. But we talked about this with the Rushkoff book, right? Like our first meeting, this was like the premise, like program or reprogrammed. If you don't know how to navigate these algorithms and write them and understand them, then you're just kind of basically, well, a puppet, really.
Mm. Yeah, I think, I agree with you. That's like the argument. And I when I watched like the documentary, that was really ringing like very strongly in my head, like to think about like when we do not understand like about the program, or like the 23 questions that might go into an algorithm, and you don't know these kind of questions. And in this kind of decision tree, when you think about an algorithm as a decision tree of questions, also like the question of how you select maybe these kind of binary questions, yes, no. So for me, these things were like very interesting, like to think about. And that's actually touching on what you are saying, Ralph, right here, like with this cultural programming. And for me, like that image right here, like of having like kind of a decision tree, and then in the end we produce kind of a knowledge, and based on that knowledge we produce something or take a decision. That was something for me. And Rushkoff, of course, was coming back again. So I just want to jump in quickly right here to echo the Rushkoff comment. What about the others? What about the breakout rooms? Did you?
Anybody else would like to share?
Well, we talked about the yes-no tree as well, but in the context of teaching and classroom and professional development. And part of our discussion went around the idea that the yes-no tree could be helpful in being objective, but at the end of the day, a human being still needs to be part of the process, was our general conclusion, that we can't rely fully on algorithms. We need to be engaged with what they're deciding for us.
Yeah, if I could add to that, I think this concept kind of bridges what you were just saying, Mary, with what we were talking about before, about being programmed, right? So this is kind of my issue that I have with the way that tech companies are trying to handle misinformation online. It's all algorithm driven. Like all of these solutions are based on algorithms that are supposed to find content and make decisions about whether it's harmful or whether it violates certain rules that whoever makes. And it really isn't a replacement for critical thinking. However, that is where the funding keeps going. Like instead of going toward, literacy programs and critical thinking education, the solution seems to be like fix it quick with AI. And there's some advantages to that, of course, but at the same time, what are we losing by, directing those funds and resources toward that automated system instead of having people actually be a part of this process themselves? So I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. We touched on that, and it kind of leads into that third topic, the third question about automation sort of replacing people and jobs and work. And I think Mary and I both agreed that the human touch is more necessary than ever because of that. How that is going to unfold is a little scary. And so I think that the approachability of this particular documentary, though not, again, positive, did little to address any of those kinds of concerns that, and nor was it intended to, but the concerns around what lies behind those algorithms, or what you do with that information, or how it was built in the first place, what you do when you gather it, and then it just makes the human the more necessary. Mary had a nice phrase called the duty of care. Am I getting it right, Mary? I loved that phrase.
We sort of alluded to that in our breakout discussion as well, that the documentary came from a mathematician. Essentially, they're looking at problems and elegant, beautiful, perfect solutions to those problems. Whereas it's not so binary for someone who comes from social sciences or humanities. Maybe that's something that needs to be thrown into the mix, yes?
And if I want to add right here, like the question is also about the problem as such. You see, if remember, like the documentary was at one point they talked about these huge warehouses, and the problem was about like how to get one book to the other side of the warehouse. And the solution is right here very beautiful, but at one point, I'm saying that now. But if the problem is then more related to criminal justice, for example, or like topics that might be more like social problems, then it might be interesting to see like these kind of algorithms, what kind of role they can play and what are the risks right here. So I think it's very important right here to think about like the problem at the beginning, what this algorithm tries to solve right here as well. And yeah, so that's like a little inflex right here.
Yeah, one of the other things I think is kind of interesting about it is the relationship between rational decision making and impulse. I can't remember where I read it, but it was something about how without impulse, it's very difficult to make decisions because there's just too many factors that play into it. And this person was specifically talking about like trying to decide, should you have a meeting on Wednesday or Friday? And you can weigh them against each other, but without eventually shifting to an impulsive, okay, we'll do this. You never exhaust the possibilities. It's like being a bad chess player, because I sit there and think far too much about too many possibilities and lose any sense of what impulsively might work. And so then the other person gets frustrated and knocks the board over and walks away, So I think that's an interesting part of it too, is how do we account for, or, even in a critical way, try to think about how impulse works. And I think about things like ordering at restaurants or deciding what to watch or something like that, because eventually you have to stop weighing all the decisions and just pick something, right?
Yeah, that's interesting. I have not thought about that actually, that impulse and that rationality. It sounds for me right away like thinking fast and slow, but I'm not sure if there's a connection. And
and I added to that the idea of intuitively or intuition, sort of. I was recently with my granddaughter, just a little sidetrack, and she was showing me some math. She loves math. She's doing her math homework, and she kept second guessing herself, like, that's not the right answer. I think it's this, but I don't think so. And I'm like, in every instance, her first instinct, her first intuition to what the response was accurate. And so though I loved her checking, yeah, you want to check your math, there was something taken away from the joy of it in there, and also her confidence. So I don't know, something about again, which comes back to a human touch. It's something human. I don't know. I don't know how to bridge those worlds, but that's my whole world. And serving pre-K-12, people and the teachers who serve them, I can't think about any of these decisions without it being in a social context, a moral and ethical one.
So we had like Ralph, he's teaching like on a little bit like cultural programming. Do we have some other people maybe having experience with teaching algorithms? Any kind of experience? On my side, sometimes it comes in when I talk about lateral reading. I thought about it because there's like 3 components to it. Like in the context of information literacy, you talk about, of course, Google results, and you touch on quickly on the page ranking. That there might be like a bias like an economic bias behind Google to push for certain results. And there have been some examples in the past that you can pull out then like from the media or from the newspapers. But I'm not going too far into that domain of picking up the algorithm. First of all, I don't have too much time as a librarian to teach that. But Yes, I think that there could be like something very interesting in terms also like maybe calling it search engine literacy. That's a term that I've heard in the past when they talk also about how those search engines work with algorithms. But maybe anybody who has some experience a little bit like this in the classroom?
So I talk about those things as well, but I also talk a lot about, like I start off the semester talking to the class about information overload and the amount of information and kind of how it flows and how we receive it and why it's so difficult to distinguish certain types of content from the other and the role that algorithms play in that. The problem I think that this documentary might actually help solve is that I'm kind of spouting the same thing that grown-ups everywhere are spouting right now about this problem. And I don't think that students actually really understand what algorithms are and the role they actually do play in these things. Because I'm explaining it very surface level, partly because I didn't quite understand them to this depth, but also partly because it's a big class and we have a lot to cover. And I just didn't fit, you know, an in-depth lesson on algorithms into that. But going forward, I think I would actually expand it to at least have them watch this documentary on their own so that they understand more broadly what I'm actually talking about. And it's not this like, you know, abstract algorithm fairy that's making silos and, you know, like, yeah, it's like something more concrete, I think.
I think what I'm just like adding right here, continuing also the thought, and it reminds me also what Ralph is saying in the chat box about that it's more like about simple math and not science fiction. But because there's an algorithm is like, there's lots of talk about it at the moment, I have the feeling. And it's then also like to see how certain groups in society, they talk about it, like let's say mathematicians, maybe also like business people or like social scientists. And I think it's a question then also like of language. You see, for me, I'm always, as a sociologist or coming out of social sciences, I'm always going mad when people are saying that machine learning. It sounds for me always very horrible, actually, because I don't think that it's the right term, and I really care about like the language. And so like the quote, like Ralph, that you're putting in, that it's more like simple math. For me, it's a calculating machine. I cannot more agree, actually, on the term right here, that it's not science fiction. It's really about calculating. And so it's not about something like extra or artificial intelligence, you see. And I think that documentary brings like that clear language to it, you see. And then it helps, like for me, it helped me really like to separate like these different things. And I connected it also to Dana Boyd again, who is talking sometimes about in some keynote speeches about algorithms. She's talking about the messy reality of algorithm, and she's saying that there's like these different groups that talk differently about these kind of terms. Anybody else who's using like a little bit the algorithm in the class or some other experiment? Looking at the is this guy? Well, algorithm.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
So this seems like a pretty like high level, to me it seems very high level because it's so foreign to me, but maybe it's not. Maybe kids would really understand this well. But I wonder how you would even, if you guys have thought about in K through 12 education, like to what level would it be appropriate to start introducing this concept of algorithms to children? That's a pretty big question I've just asked. So.
So if I may, my supervisor was talking about this very interesting competition that she was invited to judge, where it was a quiz on living online, and you know, she was very surprised to know people as young as in grade 8 and 9 knew about search engine optimization and backlinks. White hats, gray hats, black hats, and what they could do to you know, make their page rank higher. what was legally possible so that they wouldn't get blacklisted by Google or other search engines. So,
Devina,
yes.
could you explain, because you had mentioned black hatting, could you tell me what that is? Because I don't know.
So essentially what you do to get your page to rank up when you're searching it is how, so it was explained in the documentary as well. How well your page ranks is how many backlinks the page has and how many other backlinks that those pages have done well in their own ranking. So how do you get these backlinks to work for you? So there are these 2 or 3 ways in which you can, tweak the search engine. So black hatting is like an illegal way of doing it. You kind of going into the dark web and accessing or hacking sites to bring your page rank up, which is something that if Google taps into, you get blacklisted. So there's also white hatting, which is what you do. So you organically bring your page rank up by working hard. And gray hatting is the smart way of using a mixture of both to get your page rank higher. And of course, if you have money, you can always buy stuff. So yeah. I also wanted to ask, this question that we had. How do we connect this documentary to other resources, books, readings, podcasts? We've already gotten, I think Michael has already mentioned Ruskov. Michael mentioned Algorithms of Oppression by Noble in our breakout. Anything else? Any other resources that we know? And the K-12 question that Samantha raised.
So I'll just say out loud here, I put a recommendation that Ralph had in our breakout session too, to a PBS documentary about how the brain works. And I don't know, Ralph, if you want to just make a quick shout out about that.
There we go. Okay. Yeah, it's I think it's a 3 or 4 part series that David Eagleman did for PBS about the brain. And he's a neurophysiologist at Baylor Medical. And he's very good at making very complex topics accessible, very much like this documentary. Among them, he talks a lot about the relationship between the physiology of our senses and how our brain works. So I think there's a useful linkage, if again, for thinking about the relationship between algorithms and any relationship they have to the way our brains work. So that's what I found most useful about
Mm. Personally, for me, I really enjoyed like Dana Boyd, listening to Dana Boyd, like in general. She was focusing a lot on how data comes into being, because she's seeing, like, of course, like she's working for Microsoft in data and research. And so she sees like the data void, data cleaning, how data comes into being, how it's collected as the starting point of the algorithms. And it can have like a very big impact, of course, like at the results in the end. And she's using that in her classrooms as well. So there's like 2 documents podcasts I can share. That's no problem.
There is also this I'm trying to find the link of this interesting, I believe it was Economic Times who made that documentary on social media marketing. It showed how algorithms and cookies and other things are used to retarget and how creepy it can get. So if I find the link, I'll put it here. If I don't, then I'll send it to Sam or Michael and they can email.
Sure, that's good.
Yeah, so I'm not purposely promoting a book that's on our list, but we've had on the last couple of rounds of voting, the book, The Merchant Attentions, or what is it? Do you remember, Michael, what it's called? You probably remember. The Attention Merchant.
The Attention Merchant?
Yes, thank you. And it's on our list again to vote for our book selection this week. Or for this month, but I've been really interested to read that. So I don't know, maybe if we are more interested in pursuing this a little bit more, or at least exploring how it impacts us commercially, we could check that out as well. I think there's actually a couple about the attention as a commodity on our list. So.
And I would love to pursue more and ponder your question about it, when or how soon is too soon or not soon enough. I certainly am a proponent of exposing, our earliest learners in elementary, middle, high school, all the way through on the continuum of appropriate entry into the digital literacies, all of them. And the idea that algorithm may be its own new literacy as things continue to emerge, I think is so exciting, challenging as well to appropriately get kids talking and thinking about that without it being fear-mongering in some ways. I don't want to do that, but it is empowering for them to know how to navigate. And it's not ever too early, I don't think, in schooling to make that part of the way we need to. It's sort of need to school. It's their world. It's the world they're entering, not the old one. So schooling is definitely changing faster than we are. So the need for schooling to change.
Absolutely. And, I was also having this discussion the other day on how we sort of only talk about something sometimes when we feel that we're ready. In the class too, because we come from that, level of authority or power or whatever. Maybe it's all right to just talk about something and let them educate us for a change. I don't know if that's oh, my brother, sorry. Did you hear the bark? I'm sorry, that was my brother. Sorry. I completely lost my train of thought. Someone else.
I think you were trying to say that it would be very interesting to see the students teach us about like certain experiences in the social media, for example. And I think that's indeed like a very interesting, I think the challenge also like today with social media is like that it's so vast. And I think if you want to connect also to students, it might be very interesting to pick them up where they come from and their experiences to make then sense out of their kind of reality. And for me, like this kind of user experience approach makes a lot of sense.
Yes.
So I totally agree with that.
Also, I found in my classrooms that the students are all in very different places, that the understanding is very uneven. So this is a great approach because one student may have a lot of knowledge because of where we are in history, and another student may know nothing. So it's a great way to have them inform each other.
I'm going to try and find work related to this. So Sonia Livingston, Amanda Third, these are people who are already doing this, looking at young people's experiences and how that feeds into research or policy. So yeah, that's interesting. We've kind of digressed a little bit from only algorithms, which is interesting.
Well, I wanted to recommend something, and I don't remember whether we talked about this before. We talked about the book Weapons of Math Destruction. Are you familiar with this book? It's by Kathy O'Neill. I just post the title of it on the link here. What she does is talk essentially about the misuse of mathematical formulas and big data to accomplish whatever it's trying to accomplish. And one of the chapters that stuck out to me that I was trying to get some of my colleagues to look at was about the U.S. News and World Report rankings, which is, so it's a kind of very human algorithm. It's not a very machine-driven algorithm of creating a bunch of statistical comparisons that you can use to weigh universities against another. And of course, one of the big categories is reputation, which is the human judgment about what's the reputation of this university that falls into it. At my university, the result of it was that people looked at our ranking and they looked at all the elements and they tried to figure out, well, what can we tweak? What can we focus on in this random set of qualifications that they pick so that we could increase our ranking? And so we settled on retention. And so there was this massive effort to increase our freshman to sophomore year retention because of its importance in the U.S. News and World Report ranking, which, again, it's a very odd thing because it's random characteristics that they select out to do this ranking that then turns back on itself and becomes something people try to manipulate in order to increase the ranking. So anyway, she talks about that in the book. It might be something to consider reading at some point in the future.
But that's very interesting. Thank you very much, Ralph, for sharing that. See, it reminds me as well that we are trying to translate many of our social problems into data, into binary questions that are maybe not binary questions. And sometimes the term then comes up like of datafication. That's kind of a critique of these kind of. So I'm really looking forward to read your recommendation. Thanks a lot, Ralph, for that. So that's great.
Yeah, just to add one thing, it's an extremely well-written book, which is kind of nice. when it's really readable and accessible. Yeah.
Okay, so then even better. So then we're gonna read it for next time. I'm not sure, so but maybe we're gonna have to wrap up anyway. So it's gonna be something maybe. Sam, you want to wrap up like for the next time?
Oh, sure. Well, first of all, Devina, thanks so much for hosting. It was a lot of fun to work with you this whole month to get this together, and you did a fantastic job leading us. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
So our next meeting will be June 3rd at the regular time, 9 a.m. Eastern. You have the link here in the document to vote on next month's title. And if anybody wants to host, please do, because it's a lot of fun. That's it.
Yes. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All the best to everybody, wherever you are. And then I'm looking forward to see you next time.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Have a nice one. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, everybody.
And video's done. Oops.
Sam.
Okay.
I think